Well, United Farm Workers places the lifespan for farm workers at 48 years, as opposed to a national average of 73 years. A third of the babies born here to women under 20. Infant mortality in some of the towns here runs 50 per thousand. You've got one doctor and one doctor who comes in twice a month for a population of over 16,000. You've got no dentist for the adults in the population. You've got no optometrist. You've got one pharmacist for a population that spreads out over 40 or 50 miles. What kind of statistics do you want?
During the spring of 1979, Robin Burgess worked as a VISTA volunteer in Il Mirage, Arizona, providing aid and assistance to the migrant agricultural laborers. Il Mirage is a community of approximately 3,500 people, almost all of whom are involved in one manner or another in the agricultural labor force. I'm Dr. Michael Gray, Director of Occupational Medicine for the Arizona Center for Occupational Safety and Health. We're here today to interview a number of the members of the staff of the Maricopa County Organizing Project, also known as MCOP. During the course of the videotape, which you're about to see, we will be focusing on issues relating to the health status of the migrant agricultural laborer, with special emphasis on the problems of the undocumented migrant. 48 of the United States rely upon migrant agricultural labor during peak crop seasons. Most of these workers reside in Florida, Texas, Arizona, and California. 5 main streams of migrant workers follow the harvests from the south to the north and back. The workers of the southwest stream, who we will examine here, are predominantly Mexican-American and Mexican. However, their living conditions and working conditions serve as a common bond between them and the members of all other migratory groups. Could you tell me what the conditions are for most of the undocumented workers, how they live?
Well, they live under the trees. They usually have a campfire where they do most of their cooking. They usually have old mattresses that they pick up at the dump, or cardboard boxes that they put on the floor, on the ground to sleep in. They usually have 1 or 2 blankets, and usually you have 3 or 4 guys sleeping under the same piece of plastic under the tree. And basically conditions are terrible and really miserable.
As far as cooking and whatever, they cook over the campfires, and sanitation, there just usually isn't any. They bathe in the ditches, wash everything in the ditches.
In the course of your work, what kind of health problems would you say have been predominating with the undocumented workers that you've been working with?
Well, you have to understand the situation of the undocumented workers to understand the health problems. They come from central and southern Mexico. They walk through the desert to get here. So the trip sometimes takes 3 or 4 days walking through the desert. When they get here, they live predominantly in the citrus groves. They have a piece of cardboard underneath them and a blanket to cover them at night, and maybe a plastic one over that to keep the rain out. They cook in the orchard also. So what you have, people, of course, then are very susceptible to April or May, things like the flu, especially when there's any kind of epidemic. We have had any number of cases of people being burned or killed from burning with the fires that they make. They generally have some mixture of kerosene or gasoline that they douse the fires with. And there's been several cases of those gasoline cans exploding when they're making the fires. We've had, I think, 3 or 4 cases in the last year. We also had one case of an electrocution. They use metal ladders, and as one person was changing the ladder from one orchard to another, his ladder hit a power line, and he was also electrocuted, very badly burned. We've had several people come up with amoebas, any number of people, sometimes very grave cases. You have at any one orchard, you have to understand, these are single men between the ages of 14 or 60. They leave their families in Mexico and they come up here alone. So, of course, the The VD is rampant in the fields. Local prostitutes go out there every night.
How does MCOP get involved in that type of a problem? What kind of services can you and do you provide?
What happens is that many times if a worker has an accident in the field or gets sick in the field, they might look first for their foreman, who of course if it's late at night or at any odd hour on the weekends, they won't be able to find him. So they call up Centro Adelante or MCOP and simply say, hey, I'm sick, would somebody come and get me?
And then what do you do?
That's exactly what we do. Somebody, whatever hour of the day or night, drives out to the fields, picks them up, decides if they have to go to the clinic, to the hospital, or if they simply need a roof over their heads for a few days.
What kind of services can they get as an undocumented worker, say at hospitals and that sort of thing? Do they have a lot of problems getting help?
Not if they go to county hospital. If they go to any of the other hospitals, they're likely to be, just simply by their appearance, somebody's going to figure out that they're indigent and is not going to give them service. Most of the workers do have to go to county hospital, which of course is a waiting time in the emergency room is 6 or 7 hours.
It's how far away from the fields in this area?
It's approximately an hour away.
What is the closest hospital facility to the orchards here?
Boswell?
And the Boswell Hospital, does that hospital accept indigent patients?
No, I don't think they do.
Have you ever taken a patient to that emergency room with an emergent problem that they were refused care?
Yeah, we do have one on which, we have litigation going on. The patient is still in the hospital. This man was out in the orchard. He was shot in the arm by somebody who was out trying to rob him. He was taken to Boswell Hospital. Boswell Hospital decided he didn't have any money, so therefore they transferred him to county.
Did they give him any treatment before?
No, they didn't. No treatment whatsoever.
Boswell Hospital is located in Sun City, Arizona, a middle to upper income retirement community on the outskirts of Phoenix, immediately adjacent to the citrus groves. In February 1979, hearings were conducted by the Central Arizona Health Systems Agency on a request for a certificate of need for a new 300-bed hospital to be located in the Sun City complex. During the hearings, a friend of the patient just described gave testimony regarding the shooting incident.
Trasladarlo al hospital del condado.
The problem was that his friend got shot in the arm by some crazy guy. He went to the Boswell Hospital and they told him that he couldn't be treated there because he didn't have any money. They had to wait several hours so they could transport him to a county hospital.
Ese hombre perdió el brazo, cosa que todos deben tomar en cuenta, que toda mano trabajadora es para alimento de todos los que están en oficinas y en otros puestos más elevados, ya que los trabajadores mexicanos o toda la clase trabajadora, no importa color o raza, son los que les proveen toda aquella clase de verdura al gusto y bien, cortada toda su tiempo, su debido tiempo. Entonces, cuando se pierde una mano trabajadora, disminuye también el trabajo en los files.
The man lost his arm. And this is not just an arm he lost. It was like losing two hands because it was a working hand. For every working hand you lose, it's losing something because they contribute, these hands contribute the majority of the vegetables and citrus that the people everywhere eat, not the ones in the office only, just the field workers also.
Decíamos que si el gobierno de aquí nos da posibilidades, ya que de todas maneras nosotros estamos pagando todos los impuestos federales y estatales, nosotros siempre estamos obedeciendo las leyes. Entonces así también queremos tener derecho o acceso a cualquier hospital y con atención inmediata. Eso es lo único que tengo que decir. Por lo pronto, muchas gracias.
Since we are paying federal and state taxes, we would like to be facilitating also the service in the hospital. We are taxpayers also, and the service is greatly needed by the Mexican Americans also. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm Henry Eshelman, physician, Department of Emergency Medicines at Boswell Hospital since 1971. We have a group of 15 people serving 4 hospitals in the valley. And our emergency room policies in Boswell Hospital are no different. from our other 3 operations or any other hospital in the valley. There have been some allegations made tonight which I cannot comment on, merely because the one specific case is now in litigation. But I would like to say that there has, to my knowledge, since I have started work in June of 1971, there has been no discriminatory actions in the emergency department against any person. Everybody, all comers, are admitted and treated, and a proper disposition is made.
And you don't know of any case of a gunshot wound where a man was told to go somewhere else?
I can't comment on that. That case is in litigation.
What was the statistic for the same, the physician-patient ratio in Il Mirage?
Federal guidelines, just to give you some background, place the minimum at 1 doctor per 3,500. What we've got is the way you equivalent it out, 1.15 per 16,000 people.
I think it's also interesting to note that the Central Arizona Health Systems Agency just approved funding to build a new hospital in Scottsdale, and somebody was noting that this would bring down the time it took for a patient in some parts of Scottsdale to get to a hospital from 20 minutes to 7 minutes.
Any part
Now,
of Scottsdale is what you're saying at this point.
For people here to go to the hospital, it's sometimes an hour-and-a-half drive.
And for people within this area, within this farm working area, it can stretch out to 2 hours the further you go.
How are you folks approaching this problem, or how are the undocumented workers trying to deal with that problem themselves?
Well, the one thing that has happened is Maricopa County Organizing Project helped the workers at Goldmar Ranch to negotiate a contract calling for medical benefits. And we're in the process right now of reviewing various medical plans to see which would be the most beneficial for the workers. And the other thing that we're doing, MCOP and Centro Adelante and the various ranch committees with the documented and local workers, is we're trying to get funding for a clinic here.
Before we get on to the question of the clinic, you mentioned that there is a contract now in existence between undocumented workers and the Goldmars Ranch. Is that true?
That's correct.
Can you tell me a little bit about how the organizing effort began with the undocumented workers?
Well, I guess back in the times when, back in the early 70s when we were organizing the valley here and the UFW was going very strong, at that time the theory was that if we get rid of the undocumented workers and get the Border Patrol to come in, chase them down, arrest them and deport them, they're not going to be taking jobs away from local citizens, and they're not going to be displacing people here and lowering the wages. We can get rid of them through the immigration department. There were a few of us within the movement at the time that felt that it would be much better if the undocumented workers were organized instead. And back in 1976, we began to really go into the area of organizing undocumented workers. We got criticized very much because the trend at the time was that it is impossible to organize undocumented workers because you get them organized, you go out on strike, you're only going to be exposing them to the news media and the Border Patrol, and they're going to come in and bust everybody and deport them. We felt differently. We felt that the undocumented workers would get organized, that it was to the interest of the growers and the system within the state to keep the undocumented workers here, because if they deported all of them, they were not going to have people to do the harvest. So therefore, we went out and got them organized, and it was, I will say overall, it's been very successful. Back in the fall of 1977, when we had our first strike with undocumented workers, the Border Patrol came out and the Sheriff's Department came out, and they brought their dogs and they chased the people through the fields and they deported a number of them. But the people were pretty determined. At the time, they were making $7-8 a day. And they were sleeping on the ground. They didn't get any blankets. The smugglers and the foremen and everybody else was exploiting them. So they didn't have anything to lose. they stuck with the strike, and 27 days later they negotiated with the grower, and the grower negotiated with them, and they got some benefits.
I understand that you have, that your workforce is under contract, or a portion of your workforce is currently under contract. What has the effect been of that contractual relationship?
Well, what we did, we set down in writing what services we were going to give to our workers. It has made the workers feel like, hey, this guy's not going to change his mind next season. If we come back here next year, we're going to have these same services that he said he would give us the year before. He's not going to change his mind. He's not going to say, well, I can't afford them this year. I'm going to have to cut out this, that, and the other thing. It's given them a little bit more security, and to know that these are what the wages rates are going to be. This is what the insurance policy is going to be. This is what the housing facility is going to look like. This is what I'm assured of my job because I have a seniority list, and I have a grievance procedure. If he gets mad at me and just says, hey, I don't want you to work for me anymore, just because he doesn't like the way I look, he knows that's not going to happen. He's going to be fired for good cause, and he has a right to appeal that. That's what's happened. It's given the worker a better feeling that he has a little bit more to say than just waking up in the morning, going to work, and at night wondering whether he has a job the next day.
Yes, I'm aware that they had the contract signed, and the people representing the worker will represent most of those workers are undocumented aliens, are illegal aliens. I'm not opposed to the contract per se, that is to give these people decent housing and working conditions. I just think it's deplorable that people illegally in our country have the right to organize and say, in effect, we're here and we have the right to be here. They do not have the right to be here. They're in the country illegally. And I object myself, personally, as a citizen of the United States, to these kinds of things. I think it's a breakdown of our complete laws and a complete disrespect for our laws. And I don't believe this can be tolerated. I'm all for them having better working conditions and getting the type of pay they should get, but I don't think that this is the way to go about it. I think we must regulate our immigration.
What about once they're up here, and like you say, you know that a lot of them are going to be here, what about us providing things like health services or schooling or that sort of thing?
Well, if those people were here in a legal status, certainly. They'd be just like you and I are, and they should have those kinds of things, just like our children have them. But I don't think that if these people here are in illegal status, haven't entered illegally, there's a question there. And of course, I guess it comes down to being a moral question. It's not the children's fault, of course. It might not even be the adult's fault. He doesn't have anything in his own country, so he comes looking for opportunity, and the opportunity is here. I just think it's a large, very complicated problem, and we must start regulating it. We must have proper kinds of regulations, and then we must enforce those regulations.
One of the problems that seems to drive the Mexican workforce into the States is unemployment in their own country, or the inability to develop their own croplands. It's our understanding that they come very often from areas which are agricultural, and that provisions were made in the contract to provide for an economic development fund of some sort. Can you give us more details in relation to that?
We hope that the workers will take part of this money and go down and be able to economically develop their particular area. Be able to buy some fertilizer, be able to grow a crop, be able to live off of that crop, and instead of having to walk for 15 days and being threatened by coyotes and I mean human coyotes. The fellows who require them $175, $200 just to get them up to a job, walking across deserts and dying because of heat prostration. This is what these workers do, and we hope that a certain percentage of them, we can't hire them all. There's no way we can hire all the workers in Mexico that need to be hired. There's millions of people unemployed in Mexico. There's a lot of people starving. They're our next door neighbor, and we sit here and put a big fence across our borders and restrict them. The Border Patrol is beefing up, and the federal idea is keep them out. Don't let them take any of these jobs. Well, there's jobs available for them. We need them. And we need to help them, the others that cannot come across the border and are still starving in Mexico, to help their way of life down there.
Were there any clauses in the contract that dealt with issues of health and safety in the fields relating to the working conditions? And if so, what were those?
There is a whole series of articles in the contract that deals with pesticides, which pesticides can and cannot be used, and which pesticides have limited use in the fields.
Has that clause been followed?
Yes, it has.
A lot of the pesticides and fertilizer that they use is applied to the water directly when they irrigate the field. So naturally, in some cases, they have to use irrigation water or the irrigation canal for drinking water when there isn't any other water available. And there is a heck of a problem as far as that. Yeah.
Have there ever been situations where there'd be workers in the field who might get exposed accidentally and who develop problems?
Sure, they'll get exposed, but you want to remember that the chemicals in the field are dilute. But when you dilute a pint of material with 3 gallons of water and then spread it over an acre, it's pretty thin. The fumes will nauseate some people. I mean, if you went into a cotton field that had just been sprayed and sat down in there for an hour or two, you'd probably come out with a throbbing headache. Your eyes would probably begin to pinpoint a little bit. But most of the insecticides that we use in their dilute form are not really highly toxic. And so I'm a little bit skeptical about people that go out in fields and get poisoned unless they're out there and actually get sprayed or stay in there for a long period of time, in my opinion.
One morning we went out to do examinations. We were invited, and all the workers were ready to have exams done. And we arrived about 7:30 in the morning, and they had been spraying earlier, and the crop duster was still spraying overhead. And it was Sunday, so the workers were in their camps. They weren't working. They were still in their camps. They weren't leaving even though they were spraying. We asked the workers if they had been notified, and they said no one had notified them that they were going to be spraying that morning.
Oiga, ¿no les han dicho del veneno ese que estaban echando ahorita el tractor ese?
No.
¿No les dicen nada a ustedes de qué lo venía echando?
No nos dijeron nada, pero huele uno muy feo el veneno.
Huele feo, ¿no?
Ahí.
Sí, vimos en la bolsa donde lo traen y es pesticida, muy peligrosa. Y no les avisaron ustedes que andaban y iban a andar echando eso.
No.
¿Nunca les avisan?
Nunca nos avisan. En vez andan al aeroplano también echando.
No les avisan.
Según eso, por uno nos ha hecho mal porque pues nos enfermó.
Have you noticed that there's been any sort of either resistance to various pesticides develop among the insect strains?
Oh, yes.
I see. What happens?
Yes. Oh, they develop immunity. I mean, you never get 100% kill.
Right.
Okay, a survivor of a particular insecticide, if you go on a program and you use the same thing, say every week or every 2 weeks or whatever their interval of application might be, and you go on the same program and say you kill 90% of the insects, you have 10% that survived, and those little fellows, their offspring are a little bit tougher than, and the next time it takes a little more insecticide to kill him, and it just keeps taking more and more and more. Kind of like a dope addict.
With the knowledge that many pesticides are lipid-soluble, frequently are deposited and remain in human fat stores for life, and are found in significant concentrations in human breast milk, we must not minimize concern for the long-term effects of this class of compounds whose sole purpose is to poison living organisms. The effects of several pesticides are already known. DDT, aldrin, dildrin, endrin, heptachlor, and many others have been shown to be carcinogenic. DBCP is known to cause sterility in males. 2,4,5-T induces miscarriages and sterility, and ketone is a potent neurotoxin. To effectively evaluate the health impact of these and other pesticides on the farm worker and the public, an accurate database must be developed. However, the lack of a national reporting system regarding acute and chronic pesticide poisoning makes this task very difficult. Even in California, which has the best reporting system in the country, health officials believe that only 1% of the actual cases are reported. This is due primarily to fear of job loss or deportation, coupled with a language barrier for many Mexican Americans, as well as a lack of worker education regarding pesticides and their dangers. In this presentation, we have tried to highlight some of the most pressing problems confronting one segment of the agricultural workforce, the migrant. You have seen or heard descriptions of several types of health problems, including poor or non-existent housing, an absence of sanitation, a lack of education regarding pesticides and other hazards associated with the lifestyle of migrant agricultural workers, a lack of health care facilities in the rural areas, the problems associated with gaining access to those facilities that do exist, and the stress-creating situations that result from the constant mobility of the migrant and the threat of deportation for the undocumented worker whose presence in our country is probably as much the responsibility of growers who use them as a cheap labor pool as it is a result of the poverty of their homeland.